Welcome back. This is Daybreak, and thank you for staying with us. The hashtag on X is Citizen Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya, and at Ayub Abdikadir. With me in studio is Ahmed Hashi. He is governance and policy analyst as well as diplomatic commentator. Evan Sogade is an advocate, law lecturer, and the chairperson of the East Africa Law Society Rule of Law Committee. And Dr. Duncan Ojwangi teaches contemporary issues in international law, regional integration, and diplomatic law. Gentlemen, thank you for staying with us. Dr. Ojwang, coming to you. Before I take your account, let's hear again from the Principal Secretary on Raila Odinga's bid and all the measures that they have put in place. This is an interview that we had with him on Monday ahead of yesterday's event at State House in Nairobi, which was presided over by President William Ruto.
We are putting all measures in place to ensure that tomorrow's launch sends a very strong signal of the seriousness of Kenya's candidature. Okay, and the signal was out yesterday, Dr. Ojwang. For example, one of the main undoing of Kenya's candidacy in the last time Amina contested was Nairobi's failure to make it clear its stand on the issue of the disputed Western Sahara, and that was a major thorn in the flesh of Kenya's bid. Beyond this and also the other factors that will underpin the campaigns and the shuttle diplomacy and the mission thereafter that Kenya will embark on, how are they going to navigate this very narrow space that needs a lot of consideration given the diplomatic environment that is often characterized by norms and traditions that are not the same as those that underpin the political space often?
Yeah. I think that Kenya is multi-aligned, and Kenya strive to remain neutral or at least vague on some of the landmine issues. Morocco, during Amina's time, Morocco was really a pariah or a foster. Actually, it wasn't even a member, I think. But things have changed. Morocco has kind of reinserted itself, and it is a very strong member of AU at this point, which I think will support Kenya. But generally, I don't see Kenya coming very strongly on some of those issues. For example, Ethiopia-Somali issue, Rwanda, DRC issue, because it's not necessary. I think that we are at the golden age of Kenya foreign policy. You have heard that there is an agreement that to have an AU leadership, we must have rotation. And therefore, the dynamics like Francophone and whatever might not play exactly this time because of that arrangement, which is strong arrangement. And you can see that clearly for the East African region, Raila becomes the candidate. Officially launched by the East African president and taken over by the East African. I think that Kenya role, if you look at even the Kenya hosting the UN in Africa, the only country that hosts a lot of UN offices, you see Kenya relationship with the EU, you see Kenya relationship with America, Kenya relationship with China. You know that China, the BRICS, is actually, the BRICS is China. And you know that South Africa is a core ally of China. So when you see South Africa possibility of endorsing Raila, then you know very well that China faction probably can rally behind this candidate. So for those issues, Kenya has generally tried to play a strategic neutrality on some of these very divisive issues. It has attempted to, historically. Right now, I think that our foreign affairs are personality-driven. You know that Kenya has reinserted itself as the champion of African place in climate change. You know the conferences that Kenya has hosted. It has reinserted itself as almost one of the lead nation, and that is very different from how President Uhuru and Kibaki ran foreign affairs. So when you look at the Raila candidacy, the issue of Gen Z and all that, you know that it's the state voting. So they might have sentiments, but it's not a referendum or it's not a popular vote. It's the states and the statecrafts that are voting. And it's painful to see their loss at this point. It's more of the despair that Raila has abandoned them. But you can also flip that argument that Raila is moving out to the AU after fixing and assuring peace in his own country. There could be the idea of he has walked away or he has first secured peace and stability in his country and is moving to fix the rest.
In what aspect did he secure peace?
In the aspect that the broad-based government really, we can talk of lull before the storm, but for now we are seeing that the broad-based government has kind of changed the dynamic. You saw and you played a clip where Senior Counsel Kalonzo Musyoka is saying that the opposition will not suffer. And they will take over the mantle. Yeah. But you know that the wind out of the sail of the Gen Z demonstration changed when we had the new dynamic of broad-based government.
But Dr. Juang, you agree with me that there were a lot of very glaring missteps made by the current administration in coming up with competent personnel to populate the cabinet membership. Yeah. I mean, you don't need Raila Odinga to form broad-based government, is it? You just need the competent people to serve you. I mean, the president said that there are some ministers who he has more information regarding their own dockets. Some don't pick their calls, others change clothes in airports. Integrity matters, competency, yet he came up with them. He didn't need Raila Odinga. No, you are right. He can just get competent people.
No, but you see, I think that being that I'm not a political animal, I sometimes bemoan our naivety of real issues. Because you can take it from ideological point of view or from effect point of view that whoever he brought the Gen Z demonstration seriously took a dent and it is weak or out. So that is the effect.
That's not the point, Daktari. I mean, just hang on. Let me put him to account. I'll come to Ahmed and Evans. Just sip you a cup of coffee. Okay. Daktari, what the youthful protesters have raised are core governance issues. Yeah. And we live in this country where there are glaring constitutional violations, where the rule of law is rarely adhered to by those in power, whether this government or the previous government. Therefore, do you agree with me that if the Kenyan people hand over the mandate to anyone, that person has the responsibility in coming up with competent people, show inclusivity as the Constitution prescribes, instead of incorporating the opposition or any other party and then call it broad-based government that has restored peace? It just doesn't hold up, is it?
Yeah, that's a leading question. But you see, the idea of inclusivity is a value in the Constitution. The idea of broad-based anything is a value in the Constitution. And that value is the value of inclusivity. So whether there could be perceived weaknesses or whatever, but at least in moving towards broad-based and inclusivity in government, both as a rallying call and in action by bringing those people, there is a box ticked in the Constitution about the inclusivity of the country. And you know very well that you brought it here, that historically we have even with the new constitution, we have not fixed the idea of divisive presidential election. That is the truth. But if we can go towards constitutionalism, if we can go towards having a situation where we have we are close to inclusivity. Isn't that a value that Constitution also provides?
Okay, just only there, though unconvincing. Evans, nodding head in disagreement, I guess?
Certainly not. Inclusivity, for example, if that will have been argued, the character of a political party in and of itself is required by Article 91 to reflect the diversity of this country. In essence, what the Constitution requires, for example, for appointment into cabinet is that you go for persons who are competent and professional. I don't think we need to make nonsense of multi-partyism to have an inclusive, broad-based government. Be it as it may. My good friend, Dr. Juang, talked of Kenya being multi-aligned. Is it James Baldwin who says, look at what I do, not what I say? Let us look at what Kenya has been doing of late. We have an ambassador from the United States who is too cozy for my liking with our head of state. I saw her in some meeting out there, an ambassador placing her hands on a head of state, as if this is your golf or coffee buddy. That's a faux pas. An ambassador should know her place. This is the head of state of a country. We have Kenya coming in and being assigned some status, a non-NATO ally. And that comes with it a lot of strings attached. How are we going to sit with China on the table and convince China to look at us favorably?
There's the forthcoming FOCAC Africa Summit in Beijing.
Yes, yes. How are we going to convince emerging resurgent powers like the Turks, who are a little bit worried about the Americans? Currently, the globe is undergoing global power calibration. So if I were in charge of foreign policy in this country, I will ensure that whereas I say that I'm non-aligned, I'm sitting in the middle, I need to say that and look to be in the middle. You cannot tilt your foreign policy looking westward, and even the policies we have, the economic policies we have here, they're being driven by the IMF and the sister World Bank. These two institutions are institutions that are playing hegemonic plays for certain powers. We need to think.
Okay, Mr. Man.
The great James, the American author, said, patriotism is the last refuge of a scoundrel. And I think that we should not be given any kind of scoundrelism today, because we know the political economy of this country. The transformation that 80% of the people of this country wanted in this country has been blunted by the ethnic pact, elite compacting of ethnic groups by Mr. Ruto and Mr. Odinga. And to stabilize this country, it is not Mr. Odinga's joining of government. It's the government has been abducting people from the streets. The leadership of the Gen Zs are in jail. Some of them have disappeared. There is massive extrajudicial killings in this country. The right to protest has been met with police action, where the city and all the other cities have been cordoned off. The government is paying hoodlums and thugs to destroy this protest in a way to thwart the constitution of this country. I put it to you, Ayub, that this compacting of ethnic groups in that coalition is not going to last. And Mr. Odinga is going to be back to this country whether or not he wins, in my view, he's going to lose the AU, because the fragility of this country has never been more fragile since independence than it is today. The president is unable to govern this country at all. Secondly, someone was speaking about statecraft. But statecraft requires skill. If you talk about statecraft, you need to have something called skill. And Mr. Ruto doesn't have the skill for statecraft. And you can tell that the entire cabinet that he threw out have gone through the back door and are now back at State House. Some of them are charged with huge corruption scandals when they were finance minister in the Uhuru government. That one is now part of the budget and financial advisor to the State House. You know, the Economic Council, which has blood on his hands. They gave Mr. Ruto wrong advice about the economy. They sold themselves out to the international institutions, financial institutions, while they could have sat down and got a better deal for Kenyans. What they did is they just surrendered and came up with voodoo economics. I studied this subject, and I can tell the witchcraft that is going on in the government is bizarre. Mr. Ayub, we should not mince our words in this country. Mr. Odinga has been opposed by the Americans from the day he was born. His father was opposed by the Americans. The Americans are going to participate in the elections of the AU, and they are not going to allow Mr. Odinga to be the chair of the AU, while they refused him to be the president of this country. And as far as that ambassador is concerned, Meg Whitman, right? That's her name?
Yeah.
Well, there's another author called Walt Whitman, who is an American author, who, if was here today, would be scandalized that she has the last name of a Whitman, because this ambassador has been interfering in the internal affairs of this country, not with one hand, but with both hands. And I can say very safely today that I thought that the Gen Zs were going to overturn this government. But I think they've done the right thing. They're going to wait for the elections, and the entire political establishment in this country is going to be swept away come election day, Ayub, I put
2027.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Dr. Ojwang, earlier on, before we had reverted back to a mix of domestic politics and what may inform Odinga's campaigns across the continent, you spoke about China. There's the forthcoming FOCA Africa Summit in Beijing that will be hosted by President Xi. You talked about the EU. And now, following Brexit, the United Kingdom is off now. The French and the British are more or less doing their business differently, though on the same continent. America, the prospects of Trump presidency, given their zigzag political outcomes, Trump may be the next occupant of White House, and he has no good relations with the continent, calling the continent some unprintable names. Given these dynamics that are happening in a very fluid world, how will then this inform the elections in February? The French, of course, have a big stake, given that they have lost a huge portion of its influence in West Africa following the coups that have swept aside its influence. Some of their bases no longer operational. The war against the militant groups across the Sahel unlikely to hold up. The Russians have been welcomed by most of the West African nations, and we have seen how Putin's influence is growing in the western part of the continent. And these are Francophone countries. How is this going to pan out in this context, beyond the fanfare and the buzz at State House and in Nairobi, that it's going to be a continental affair, not a Kenyan affair alone?
It is a continental duel. And beside the laundry list of challenges, and that's why I said it's a steeplechase, there is an element of broad-based government widowers. And widows. So I think the broad-based government has created widowers here that might still not be very settled with the new happening. If you look at the idea that Kenya might be leaning towards West, might be having issues, or might have strong hand of the US, those are the very issues that one Raila Odinga summoned the English language and sent it off to war with America, calling them the bear is now thawed in the freezer or on the ice. Those are the very reasons why we need a seasoned person. And there is this thing about diplomat versus what skills, the skills Raila has gathered, including being the chair of Africa infrastructure.
Yes, the special envoy.
Yes. I mean, if you go to US, the people who practice diplomacy are former politicians. Because they have gathered something in the school of life, in the interaction. If you go to Washington, You find the people who are there as think tanks. They have very broad experience. So this idea of, I didn't see you in the School of Diplomacy or whatever, are kind of not the path well beaten by strong diplomats. But if you look at...
But okay, let's context this and juxtapose it with the elections in the last time our ambassador, Amina Mohammed, lost. A career diplomat, worked at the UN, proper connections in New York, Geneva, at the African Union, backed by what many will qualify as then charismatic President Uhuru Kenyatta, outgoing, and we lost to a little-known Chadian president, confidence-crushing defeat in Addis.
We did that in the first round.
In terms of the background that you have given me, how will then that rhyme, given the tone that President Ruto has been adopting since coming to power as a Pan-Africanist, calling out the Bretton Woods institutions for unfair financing mechanisms, but in the end, ended up causing up with Joe Biden in the White House, given a state visit. I mean, how will all this play out, given the complexities? And there may be the silent majority who are watching Kenya's moves with keen interest. How will all this be factored in?
So President Ruto articulated, as you said clearly, whether you believe the action that followed or not, that he kind of articulated the unfair system of the international financial market and all that, the exclusivity and the issue that the pendulum swing towards those other big nations, that the strong always have their way, which is realism. Isn't that the reason why they are putting on this very important vehicle of Raila chairing, so that with that aligned and with that vehicle in place, then we have institutional structures. And that came out yesterday, that the people who have been going there for the sake of job. We need somebody seasoned, convicted, and we need somebody who is so clear on what Africa needs to do. So that I look at this as a very important piece in asserting the place of Africa. As you know that 60% of arable land is in Africa and all that. But now you ask me about the multipolar world that he was talking about, that the balance of power has shifted or is shifting. I agree. But look, you know, it was in May this year that Kenya hosted something about China. It was here. And then a month later, it did something about the America Chamber of Commerce. Kenya have a relationship with the EU very strong, and is one of the countries that have been picked as the people they are working with. Kenya have a very good relationship with the UAE and all these other emerging powers in terms of business. As you have noted, that if you look at the BRICS, BRICS is really China, because Russia is engulfed in their serious wars. And that China, if you see South Africa in, you know very well, if you are a student of BRICS, that China has arrived. Now, when you look at all that network, then clearly you can see that the aggressive articulation of African issue, from climate change to the unfair financing to the advantage Kenya has in terms of technology and the skills that Kenya is readily offering, to being the center. You can see that they are all harnessing towards Raila's candidacy.
Okay, but you mentioned...
And let me just... what you see as hesitation is more of the whole idea of unfairness, that people feel that, and sometimes I feel the same. We were in the middle of something, and Raila just moved to fix this, not at micro level, but at macro level. Because if he gets to the AU, he will fix the unfair. He brought the point, and you were there. I saw you. That the idea that we are negotiating with this power bilaterally is the source of our weakness. We need a multilateral approach. Where can that be done except by AU?
Okay, I'll have a follow-up on that. Yes, Ahmed. Evans, I'll come to you.
Well, my view is, and it's, you know, when you come to the medium of the public, we speak in the interest of the public. I have my own political views. Of course, they're going to show up in what I say. But the most important thing is to take the public seriously, and that the public is able to understand the things that are going on. We have to speak to them in an educated way. You know, we can't speak to them in a way that is of low standard. So my view on this is that there is no question in my mind that I think Mr. Ruto and Mr. Raila have something up their sleeves. And I think that this AU issue is a stopgap. I think the major elephant or the whale in the room is the 2027 elections.
Okay.
And there are two competing, I don't like the word narrative, there are two competing discourses. And one discourse is the status quo, business as usual. Now, Mr. Odinga went through the election, and I believe the elections were taken away from us by some powers. And then there were demonstrations in this country, which a lot of people lost their lives.
Who are the powers who are taken?
Well, I can't, it would be irresponsible for me to just say those things on national television.
Yeah.
But
many will not agree with you because it's a matter settled by the Supreme Court.
It's already been settled by the Supreme Court. But the Supreme Court, just as the AU and everybody else, they're not in a vacuum. It's very important for our country to be stable. But we cannot drink the olive oil of evil things to make the country stable. The most important thing in making the country stable is to find some form of political justice, some form of economic justice, and some form of a legitimate, independent way in which our country can function. And that's not happening. Secondly, I put it to you, Ayub, I think that the president and the former prime minister are cooking up a constitutional way in which they can share power in 2027. And I think that the issue of the prime minister is going to come up within a year, I predict, and you can hold me responsible for this. And I think that this AU thing is a stopgap, because I think that if Mr. Odinga loses the AU, the president has another opportunity to stand up to Kenya and say, I beat Mr. Odinga by 200,000 votes. We want a government of national coalition to stabilize this country. And therefore, we need a constitutional agreement so that the former prime minister can come back and share this government. Mr. Odinga is not going to stay out of government in Kenya. I can guarantee you that. And I think you should hold me responsible for my comments within the next 8 months to 1 year. Lastly, Mr. Ayub, and I think that the Kenyan people have now grown very wise, because this issue of nusu mkate every other electoral cycle makes nonsense of our electoral democracy. And the president used to call him mutu ya kitendawili, na hakuna nusu mkate. President lied to this country. I mean, I didn't say it. It's in the public record. I mean, we should call him out on it. And I think that we have to stop lying to the people of this country, economically, politically, and sociologically. And I think the Gen Zs are our hope, and I hope that they form their political party and they can sweep these fellows to the dustbin of history come election day.
Yes, Evans.
The elections in February will be a matter for the 54 countries. Mr. Odinga will need 2/3 of the vote of these 54 to make it. We certainly cannot ignore the influence of the French, and the French have had their tentacles in Africa for the longest time ever. The French are reeling from the losses in the Sahel. Domestically, Macron will want to show the French public that we are not losing our jewels around the world.
Correct.
There's been unrest in Caledonia, Martinique, the Sahel. The new young leaders are coming in and quote-unquote tamping their noses at their French.
Even in France itself there's been...
Yes. The far right is rising in France.
Yeah.
So Macron will want to settle this so that they have somebody who will be friendly to French interests. So anybody who is organizing Mr. Odinga's candidature has to be alive to the influence of the French. Then another key player in all this is Vladimir Putin and the Russians. They are heavily invested in the Sahel. They're actively protecting those coup regimes in that belt. You cannot secure the support of these countries in the Sahel, Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, without talking to Vladimir Putin. So every vote counts. And this points to the requirement for us domestically that moving forward, we need to think of how we run our diplomacy. We cannot be ad hoc, we cannot be reactionary. Kenya needs the very best in terms of who represents us out there.
All right.
Kenya needs to create friendships with our neighbors here. Africa, the African diplomatic corps here, that's our primary constituency.
All right.
Can I add one word to this?
Just hang on. Okay, just hang on.
You know, part of the problem, and I think the panelists have brought it up, is that, you know, we've been appointing Matatu touts as ambassadors. It's true. They're ridiculous, uneducated people who have been given political, they went to the constituency, they helped the president, then they went and got appointed. Part of the problem of the government of Mr. Ruto was competency. You just said it, Ayub, there was incompetence in the system. And the president admitted that. Everything we're saying is in the public record. There's no theory about what I'm saying. So one of the things that's going to fail Mr. Odinga is these ambassadors in Africa who have been given these plum jobs because they helped UDA. And they have no idea about lobbying. They could hardly speak the English language. Forget about French. If I were to advise Mr. Odinga today, I would say that he should fire his secretariat, call the governor of Kisumu, Mr. Anyang' Nyong'o, give him the power to constitute a team, to go to Addis Ababa, and I think if he does that, Mr. Odinga will have a chance. But if he goes with these fellows I've seen in the secretariat here, he's not even going to pass the first round. Sorry.
Evans, I was on you because you have made a very pertinent point there, and subject to, of course, the debate. I want to talk about that. But we have recently seen the sweeping changes across the Sahel that had seen more or less the loosening of the grip of the French on the countries that had witnessed coup, which had the support of the people, ejecting the French out, the Americans out, and welcoming the Russians. We have seen the operations by the Wagner Group. But will Emmanuel Macron, then the French president, a veto power for that sits at the as a permanent member of the UN Security Council, who has hung parliament after the local elections, struggling to form a government, faces the prospects of the rising far rights under the flanks of Marine Le Pen, though of course indirectly now. Will he then bank, or will Paris then see the Djibouti candidate as the perfect match for its affairs in Africa and someone to drive its agenda, given its erosion of influence across the Sahel?
See what Djibouti has done and Kenya has not learnt over the years. Djibouti has strategically placed itself as the ideal neutral. How many military bases do we have in Djibouti? Around 8.
Yeah.
Everybody speaking about security matters in the region has to consult Djibouti. That is one advantage that plays to their hand. Now, in terms of the French influence, remember the AU is largely funded by the European Union. One of the principal backers financially for the European Union is the French government. So there are many cards that the French can play, including playing the financial card. We are not going to do ABCD unless this happens. So France is not bereft of the cards it can play. It still has allies within Africa, Cote d'Ivoire, other countries, French-speaking countries. Senegal is dancing in the middle, but it can still be relied on. We need to talk to those people. In terms of the diplomats, the people we are sending out there, and as Hashi correctly says, where is Ambassador Mencha in all this? Ambassador Mencha has been a bureaucrat within the AU circles. certainly he has his knowledge and reach.
And me.
We have Hashi here. He has his role he's played. He certainly knows a couple of things. Why don't you bring in such people who will tell you the truth? Because if you bring in people who will be there for the glitz and the glamour, they will not get you the results. That's our problem.
Okay, just hang on, Ahmed. Dr. Ojwang, the last time we were in Addis and the extension of the party invitations, thinking that it was all in the bag before the vote was done. President Kenyatta was among the first heads of state to be in Addis, received then by Prime Minister Haile Mariam Desalegn. And everyone thought it's Ambassador Amina Mohamed, Kenya, and Abdullahi Bathily from Senegal who will clinch before Musa Faki Mahamat mushroomed from nowhere to clinch the seat. Given this unpredictability about generally elections, and now that we'll be dealing with different heads of states, convincing different governments, considering there are different circumstances, do you think the secretariat that yesterday the president said will take over the mission now, Ambassador Dr. Korir Singoi and the others, will overcome this?
I think the unveiling was just the leadership of the secretariat, because the president just mentioned the two gentlemen. One, because you needed to combine the former Prime Minister Raila's private campaign wing with the bureaucratic, so that it's seamless. And that's why he put the PS Foreign Affairs, who at the bureaucratic level must just be there and very, very able. And then he put Ambassador Odembo to have a joint chairmanship or leadership. So the secretariat, in my view, has not been fully unpacked. And therefore, there is a place for the Nyong'os, the former AU, and serious people to be there. So we have not seen the full secretariat. But what is coming out clear is that we still have a part of our population that are dislocated and are not very happy with the speed at which Prime Minister Raila is very riverine and has moved to fix. So that dislocation is a spillover effect. I see it in WhatsApp and in Twitter. A number of Kenyans are not happy. But you know, and there is no index to measure the unhappiness or what could be the impact. He talked about the witch logic or the voodoo logic. You know, my mom will simply tell me, don't eat from that neighbor, she's a witch. There is no science to it. It's either you believe it or not. But when you look at the data, you can see it was, Kikwete is also coming. Kikwete was there to endorse Raila. I'm just telling you that there is a little bit, when the dust settle and the dislocation become a little bit less annoying, people might understand that there is a lot of ground covered. Election is not guaranteed, yes, but we had Kikwete was going to be the candidate, isn't it? Kikwete was there to support and in solidarity with Raila, which I'm telling you, if you're a student of international relations and geopolitics and geo-interest, then it is huge that Tanzania is coming along Kenya at this early stage without any condition. Now, the French that they're talking about, those people usually go with EU. And the EU, I think, are here. Now, Russia is has a lot of trouble right now. And so the BRICS really is China. That's why I'm ignoring Russia, Brazil, India. And if you see South Africa, you have seen China. What I'm saying
How important is the BRICS to Kenya?
Kenya have done very well with the BRICS because you know, and this is his lecture. Let me quote him. Okay. You know, even as we talk about the world moving from bipolar to multipolar, he told us clearly, and I agree with him, that the hegemony is still the US. That is why every music, every eating place is doing McDonald's. Am I doing a good job?
Doing a good job, my learned
friend. Don't be so much carried away with this theory that power has really shifted. We know, and the accusation is that US put their scale or their support towards the Ruto candidature in Kenya, and that made a difference.
Yes.
So even as we are prone to wander, as we sing in the SDA church, because we are a little dislocated, let us not forget that the hegemony here is still the US. It is Hollywood. It is their music. It is their food. It is their style. Exactly. It's their election. And the US is fully behind one candidature of Raila Odinga. Now, that is a heavyweight. Once you have seen the US, believe me, the other forces like French and whatever, and EU will fall along. There is no election that is guaranteed, but Kenya is
to just be factual and to talk the US has no vote in this.
We were talking of the influence, isn't it? The spillover influence.
They have their fair share of problems over there.
The one is saying the ambassador is putting his hand on it. They are here.
They are everywhere.
Can I just add that?
They have over 720 military bases across the world.
Yes.
So to drive the point of hegemony home, I'll come to you, Ahmed, just one. And you talked about the relevance of the BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, South Africa, and China. But on the two most occasions, two meetings convened by two BRICS members, South Africa in Joburg, by President Ramaphosa. President Ruto sent his then Foreign Affairs CS, Alfred Mutua. Then came the St. Petersburg Russia-Africa Summit hosted by Vladimir Putin. Mutua was there again. In the two most important meetings of the convened by BRICS members, President Ruto never attended. But look at the fanfare that he was accorded in Washington. Is he more or less appreciating America than what appears to be a changing world where America is eroding given inability to mediate ceasefire between...
If you're a friend of the United States, it's very dangerous. But if you're, an ally, your situation is fatal. We never know what the Americans are going to do and how they're going to do it. But we can make an assessment about what they will support because of the ideological, economic, and political situation the world is in right now. Secondly, the Global South, and the Global South is another very important institution that's coming up in international relations. And of course, our president made another mistake when he went to Ukraine, and he just blasted the Russians over Ukraine, where he should have played the game of being a negotiator who tried to bring people together. Mr. Ruto has put his lot with the West, and the West kicked him in where the sun doesn't shine. And part of the problems we have in this country is this closeness he has to the West and the reaction of the other groups of powerful institutions and countries and states around the world. So that's the second point. The third point is that how is that going to play in the AU? I firmly believe that the European Union, and which the French have huge influence over, the core of the European Union is the alliance between Germany and France. Now, I can tell you the Germans are going to help Mr. Odinga because the Germans are very close to...
Speaks the language.
Yeah, he speaks the language, etc.
Went to school.
You saw the ambassador come to his office the other day. But when it comes to Africa, the French have a very high leverage. And the Americans, the French are an ally of the Americans within NATO. Now, the question at the core of this is that's a very sad story that we as Africans are speaking about how the West and the East control our politics. It's a sad commentary about what's happening. The second thing is that I think that Mr. Odinga would make a very good African Union chairman. I've been his close aide for a very long time. I think that he is the best politician of his generation. What Kenyans feel about Mr. Odinga is this sense that there's a betrayal of Mr. Odinga at the very moment that we reach the gates of transformation in this country. Mr. Odinga walked there naked and everybody could see who he was and that he supported the status quo. He was part of the ethnic configuration and he did not support the popular national transformation that 80% of the people in this country, and everybody is extremely sad about it, including me. Lastly, I put it to you, Mr. Ayub, that there is a line in Shakespeare. You know, Mr. Odinga calls himself a lion. You remember he's saying he's the lion of Africa. There's a line in Shakespeare that said that now in the winter of our discontent, made glorious by the son of York. So I think it's in Hamlet. I think that the lion is in winter now. And I don't think that lion is going to go and bite anything at the AU. I think that Kenya is going to be in for a shock. And I think you should hold me responsible for my comments the next time I come.
Time will tell,
and you should put it on the TV, because I predicted bigger things than this.
Yes, Evans. There's also the forthcoming debate.
Yes.
Our former Prime Minister may deploy English Swahili, but you have a candidate who is speaking French, possibly Arabic, Somali, and may appeal to a vast audience than Mr. Odinga can in terms of reaching the audience.
Yes.
Yeah.
The deals are usually made behind the scenes.
Yeah.
So in diplomacy, let us not forget those social items like language, religion, those count. So whoever is in charge of this campaign needs to be cognizant of that, because this Djibouti candidate has those advantages, and those advantages may come and become a problem for us, like it was with the Ambassador Amina candidature. What we need to do, and this has been our underbelly as Kenya, we are very big at rhetoric. We come, buzz, social media, say a lot of things, but what are the structures? For me as a lawyer, I'm keen on the structures. That is why I keep on harping the need for us to have competent people to do things behind the scenes. We have career ambassadors in this country, people who speak multiple languages, people who can serve in various capacities in this country. What have we done with those career ambassadors? We have made them sit in offices. They are not serving the country. What benefit will a political failure do for us at this moment? You want to send an ambassador who cannot speak French to DRC Congo and speak to the president there over this candidature. The language barrier, of course, will become a problem. The personal connections. We've had Ambassador Sumbewo do a lot of good for this country with the South Sudan issue because of the personal connections. If you send somebody else who doesn't have the attributes of Ambassador Sumbeyo to the Sudan, you're going to have a problem. And of course, the president, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, moving forward and for future campaigns, let us sit in the middle. Let us run our diplomacy from the middle. We don't need to show our hand.
Thank you. Let's now sample the feedback. Dr. Ojwang, I'll give you 30 seconds, closing remarks. And here's what you are saying on X. The hashtag is Citizen Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir to just sample some of the feedback that you have sent us here regarding the topic at hand and the candidature of the former Prime Minister, Raila Odinga. Sir Nixon Dugure says, wishing Honorable Raila Odinga success as he also plans to face and overcome Africa's challenges like political and institutional instability, peace, climate change, deficits in economic governance, poverty, marginalization of women and the youth, etc. Boni Kire says, we are wishing Raila Odinga the very best. He is a true Pan-Africanist and he is the best candidate for this job. Gabriel Kasiaka says, Raila possesses the professional capacity and experience and proven track record of transformative leadership and widespread of accomplishments at the national and as a national and regional leader. Clement says, all the best to Mr. Odinga in his AU bid. It's unfortunate he's retiring from politics and he hasn't pointed at his heir to the throne. But again, if he loses, he should retire permanently from politics to give room for other uprising leaders. Peter Gisura says, as a country, we wish Odinga all the very best as he starts a tough contest in February 2025. He has left a weak opposition in the country, which is so sad, according to him. Engineer Lazaro says Kenya's AUC bid this time round comes at an advantage point with Eastern and Southern and Western African regional leaders backing. Let's stop being doubting Thomases and go after French colonies for backings. Frederick Okango says, I'm listening and watching Mr. Hashi's submissions. He seems to be perfecting his criticism of Mr. Odinga's AUC candidature as an expert. What can Hashi offer to the now EAC candidate? Too much talk?
Well, I've given some suggestions.
Yeah.
I've criticized, but I'm also giving some solutions.
Thank you. Yes, Dr. Ojwang.
Yeah, I think Kenyans are becoming afraid to lead. We just saw what Kenyans were able to do in the Olympics in terms of soft diplomacy. We led the region. We have got another golden opportunity to lead the region. This is the East African moment. Yesterday, you saw all the East African head of states coming and rallying behind Raila. Djibouti only has, I don't know, eight diplomatic officers. Kenya has 36 in Africa.
Okay.
Please, Kenyans, have your Olympic cap on. The diplomatic officers, Kenya has 36 in Africa.
Okay.
Please, Kenyans, have your Olympic cap on the way we won Olympic.
Yes.
And let us not be have this tired argument of always seeking to downplay this giant. The lion roared yesterday, and Africa had it very well.
Thank you, gentlemen. Your time is appreciated. Dr. Duncan Ojwang teaches contemporary issues in international, regional diplomatic issues and integration. Evans Ogada, advocate, law lecturer, the chair of the East Africa Law Society Rule of Law Committee, Ahmed Hashi, governance and policy commentator, as well as diplomatic affairs analyst. Gentlemen, this can be a very extensive topic, but thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you, sir.
Much appreciated,
Much
and
appreciated.
we'll have this conversation some other time.
Yes.
Thank you.
Till then, good morning. And we'll see you shortly here on the broadcast for another discussion. Thank you.